day 582 of the Trump administration, and there's been a new escalation of legal pressure on the president. Today, we learned another member of the innermost circle, Trump Organization Chief Financial Officer Allen Weisselberg, has been talking to the feds, and he's been granted immunity. Once again, the Wall Street Journal was first out with this story. They write that Weisselberg provided, quote, information about Michael Cohen and the criminal investigation into hush money payments for two women during the 2016 presidential campaign, according to people familiar with the matter. Rudy Giuliani, a lawyer for Mr. Trump, said he wasn't aware that Mr. Weisselberg had been granted immunity and didn't know whether the president had knowledge of it. Even at the Trump Organization, where fewer than 30 employees work on the 26th floor of Trump Tower alongside Mr. Weisselberg, the revelation that the CFO had been granted immunity from prosecutors surprised many executives. NBC News has confirmed that report about Weisselberg and that he indeed is the man referred to as Executive One in the Michael Cohen court documents, and that Weisselberg is the one who arranged to reimburse Cohen for his payments to Stormy Daniels. Weisselberg is the latest Trump associate to get immunity. Yesterday, we learned David Pecker, publisher of the National Enquirer and a longtime Trump ally, also obtained that same privilege for giving prosecutors information about Mr. Cohen. It was only this Tuesday when Cohen pleaded guilty, remember, to campaign finance violations related to those payments, which he told the court were at Trump's direction. Weisselberg goes back to when Trump's father ran the company. He is the longtime keeper of the books, who even appeared with Trump on season 2 of The Apprentice.
Replacing George this week is my chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg. And you think George is tough? Wait till you see Allen.
Weisselberg was also part of the team put in charge of Trump's finances after he won the 2016 election.
He has relinquished leadership and management of the Trump Organization to his sons, Don and Eric, and a longtime Trump executive, Allen Weisselberg. Don, Eric, and Allen are committed to ensuring that the activities of the Trump Organization are beyond reproach.
And earlier on this network, a former Trump campaign advisor detailed Allen Weisselberg's role in the Trump Organization.
Allen, as far as I know, has been with the president, then Mr. Trump, the Trump Organization, since the 70s, since it was even based in Brooklyn. Allen, on the 26th floor, he had his own fiefdom. He had multiple people working for him. There's a large accounting office there. They all report to him. I am sure Allen got frequent, had to give frequent reports to then Mr. Trump about the Trump Organization.
Weisselberg is the latest piece to fall, bringing this case closer and closer to that man. As Shannon Pettypiece of Bloomberg writes, Trump's, quote, sense of invulnerability is in for its biggest test as he suddenly must defend against grave threats. The threat is intensifying as Trump confronts a midterm referendum on his presidency. That, plus a feeling of betrayal, may have motivated this from the president just yesterday.
This whole thing about flipping, they call it. I know all about flipping. For 30, 40 years, I've been watching flippers. Everything's wonderful, and then they get 10 years in jail, and they flip on whoever the next highest one is, or as high as you can go. It almost ought to be outlawed. I've seen it many times. I've had many friends involved in this stuff. It's called flipping, and it almost ought to be illegal.
With that, let's bring in our leadoff panel on a Friday night. All three returning veterans. Ken Thomas, White House reporter for the Associated Press, who traveled with the president to Ohio today. The aforementioned Shannon Pettypiece, White House correspondent for Bloomberg. And we welcome back Richard Painter, who returns to us after a bid for U.S. Senate in Minnesota. Richard, of course, chief White House ethics lawyer formerly for the White House of President George W. Bush. Good evening and welcome to you all. Ken, having made the trek today, did you discern any difference in mood in the traveling White House as opposed to the stationary kind?
Brian, we didn't have any visits by the president to our press cabin, either on the way or on the way back from Columbus. His speech was somewhat subdued in Columbus. It was a fundraising dinner, so it wasn't the same kind of atmosphere you would normally see at a rally. But there's no way to sugarcoat this. This has been a terrible week for the president, and it strikes at the heart of the loyalty that he always insists upon his aides and his ability to control the future of these investigations. He's had 3 people essentially turned their backs on him in the span of a week. I was speaking to a longtime Trump advisor who said that Michael Cohen is actually someone who he can't control now, even though he's president. President Trump can sit at the Resolute desk. He's the commander-in-chief. He can press a button and have a Diet Coke instantly appear, and yet he can't control Michael Cohen, and that speaks to the predicament that he finds himself in.
Shannon, along those same basic lines, what does it tell you when Rudy says they had no idea the CFO had an immunity deal?
Well, I think sometimes maybe Rudy's not informed on all the various legal matters. He's informed on things dealing with the Mueller investigation or that he needs to know to speak about on television. I mean, our reporting does indicate that the Trump Organization was aware that Allen Weisselberg had spoke to a grand jury, that as part of that grand jury appearance, he sought an immunity deal and was granted one. I mean, he still is with the Trump Organization, where, typically two lawyers on each side share information. So I don't think this was a huge secret to everybody. It doesn't mean it was the type of information that was shared with everyone. But I don't think it was not the closely kept secret that I think Rudy thinks it was.
All right, Richard, having advised a president and a West Wing on legal matters, how bad a week was this legally for the Trump White House?
Well, I've certainly never seen anything like that, because I never advised a president who had his campaign manager and his deputy campaign manager found guilty or plead guilty to multiple criminal charges the same day that his former attorney was pled guilty to 8 felonies. And now we have the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization turning state's evidence. I have to say that every white-collar criminal defense lawyer knows that when the chief financial officer turns state's evidence, everyone in the executive suite is in a lot of trouble, because the chief financial officer knows exactly where the money is coming and going. And that includes not just the money being used to pay off various women who have been engaging in sexual activity with Donald Trump, but it also may very well include Russian money. And remember that every time Bob Mueller gets anywhere near Donald Trump's money, Donald Trump starts threatening to fire Bob Mueller. It appears that they're closing in on the basic financial structure of the Trump Organization, perhaps the reasons why he's not disclosing his tax returns. And what we may find there is really quite ugly. So this has been a very, very bad week for the president. It's shocking, though, that Congress is doing absolutely nothing about this. We're well past the point where we were in Watergate in 1973, when they had hearings looking into the obstruction of justice and other criminal activities going on in the Nixon administration. This is far worse, and yet Congress is doing absolutely nothing. It's pathetic.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.